Okay, so today we're going to go through how to complete meta-analysis and complete effect size calculation and risk ratio calculations through Revman. So first of all, you need to download Revman. As we've talked about before, if you Google free Revman download, you will be able to find links in order to download it and install install the full version when you install it. Now, when we open Revman, obviously just open up as you do with any other program. What we want to do from here is we want to create a new file. So plain and simple, file, open new, click on next. Now this will give you a number of options. We want to pick intervention review. Click next again. Now this will allow you to title your review. So we're going to look at gluteal muscle activity. And this isn't an intervention as such, but we're looking at gluteal muscle activity in patellofemoral pain, just as our example today. So we type that in and we click next. Now what we don't want to do is do a protocol, we actually want to do a full review. In order to calculate the effect sizes, etc., we need to do a full review. So click full review and then finish. Now from here, the first step in the process of entering your data is obviously to extract your data from each paper. Once you've got all of this data, so whether it's effect sizes and you need your means, standard deviations and participant numbers, or if it's dichotomous data where you have your events and participant numbers for each group. Once we've got this, we can then enter it into Revman. So what we're going to do now is we're going to enter some references. So on the left hand side here you can coordinate everything. So if we double click on references, and you'll see here included studies and excluded studies. The only thing you need to worry about in here is the included studies part. Unless you're doing a full-blown Cochrane review, the program is actually quite simple to use. There's only a few parts that we actually need. So we click on Add Study. Now our first study we're going to add today is Wilson, which is a paper which looks at glute med EMG during running, and that was published in 2011. So whatever you want to come up on the graphs in terms of on the left hand side to title each plot, this is what you need to type in here. So if sometimes it might not be appropriate to type in the author's name, we may actually type in the task that someone was doing or the outcome measure. So you can play around and structure it how you like. So we pop that in there and we click finish. So we now have a study. We're going to add a couple more just for the example. So the other studies we're going to add is Amanaka, and that is 2011, and we'll finish. We're going to add bowling, and that we have 2006. We're going to hit finish, and then we're also going to add in Brindle, and that is 2003. And we're going to add in Cohen 2009. So you can flip to and fro these couple of areas. So I'm just adding a few studies at once, but you can add more studies later. So now we've got all of our studies entered, we can then go to data and analysis. Now if we click on here, what we want to do is we can add comparison. So we can click on here, or we can right click and simply add comparison. So what we're looking at is glute medius muscle activity, so gluteal, we'll just call it muscle activity. So this is our outcome that we're going to be looking at, and we click next. So we won't do anything with it as yet. So we've got this now as a measure. So on the left hand side you can see we've now got gluteal muscle activity. Within that we can add an outcome. So our outcome will determine, you can determine whether it's dichotomous, continuous, so these are the main two you'll choose from. Our data today, or to start with, is continuous, so we click on continuous, we'll click next. The name of this data will be gluteus medius onset time. And we're going to have two groups. We're going to have a control group and we're going to have a patellofemoral pain group. So PFP, and we've got control. Next. Now this is where we want to choose our model and what we're going to do. So don't worry about touching statistical method, but in analysis model we want to leave it on fixed. Our effects measure, we want to go with standard mean difference. Now if it's mean difference, it will just give you the difference in the raw values. Standard mean difference will complete your effect size a little bit better in terms of comparison between groups. If you forget to do this, you can change some of these things later, so don't stress too much. We'll click next. We can also choose whether to have totals, subtotals or no totals. We'll start with no totals, so we're not necessarily going to pull anything to begin with. And then we can choose our confidence intervals. Just leave this on 95 and we carry on, and then we can label our graphs as well. So for the purpose of this, if we've got a larger number which is in the patellofemoral pain group, then we're going to say that we've got going for delays. So we'll call this delayed in PFP, and on the right hand side of the graph we're going to put earlier in PFP. Now you can always change these labels later if it doesn't make sense. It's always worthwhile checking your data once you've done it. Now scale, we don't want a scale of 100. 100 is a ginormous effect size, so we're going to go with a scale of 2. So 2 is a pretty large effect size. And then we can also sort the studies by study ID, which will put it in alphabetical order, effect size, year of study. There's a number of different ways you can do it. I often like to just do it in order of effect size, so you can see the trend over time. And we click next, and then we're done. So now we have our outcome, which you can now see, glute medius onset time. Now we can add study data straight into that. So if we only had one group that we wanted to look at and there was no subgrouping, we just add study data straight away. For the purpose of today, we're going to do a couple of subgroups. So the two tasks we're going to look at is running and also stair ascent. So I'm going to add a subgroup here, and we're going to make this running, and we're going to click finish. So we now have running in here, and we also want to look at, so we'll add another subgroup because we also want to look at stair ascent, and finish. So now we have our comparison, which is glute muscle activity. We have our outcome, which is gluteus medius onset time. We could obviously add further outcomes. So for example, we might also have gluteus maximus onset time. So we can add more here. And I won't go through all these steps again, but we'll just finish. And now we've got 2 different outcomes. We can add subgroups to them, and so on. So what we'll do now is we're going to go through and we're actually going to add some study data in. So if we look at running, we can now add study data. It will ask us which of our references we want to put in there. So we have data for Wilson, so we're going to click on him and we're going to click finish. And then for stair ascent, we're going to add some more study data, and we have data for Amanaka, we have data for Bowling, we have data for Brindle, we have data for Cohen. So I'll push control to highlight each of them. You can add more later down the track, it's not a problem. So now running, so if we look at the Wilson study, we have an onset time for patellofemoral pain of 35.2. We have a standard deviation of 32.3, and we have a total number of participants of 20 in the patellofemoral pain group in their study. If we look at the control group, we have a timing of 59.7. We have 32.6, and we have total number of 20. Oops, 32.6 and a total number of 20. Job done. So now we'll see that if we look at our effect size, you'll now be able to see across the top here, you can actually have a look at the graph, and this will show us that individuals with patellofemoral pain have a delay in glute med activity during running. So an effect size of 0.74. So we've got that. Now we're going to add some more data here. So we've got Amanaka, we've got minus 92.4, we've got 42, we've got 20 participants, and then we've got minus 80, we've got 38, and then we've got 20 participants, and you'll see another graph will come up. For bowling, we've got 82, we've got 153, so quite a large standard deviation, we've got 14 participants, and then in the control group we've got 20, we've got standard deviation of 52, and again we've got 14. So that was for Brindle. I've done these in the wrong order, that's okay. We've got 88, we've got 110, we've got 16 participants. So if you've got all this data written down, it's quite quick and easy to enter. We've got 182, we've got 110, and we've got 12. And then our final outcome for Cohen, we've got minus 30, we've got 32, we've got 10 participants, and then we've got 20, we've got 37, and we've got 27 participants. So now we have all of our effect sizes. So you can see there's a big variation in effect sizes here from the data that we've pulled out. So we can have a look at the graph without completing any effect sizes, any data pulling. You can see that we've got a range of different results for stare ascent. We've got just one result for running, so we can add that as a figure, but we can also add, change and play around with this a little bit more. So these little cogwheels up the top are properties. If we want to change anything, we've entered things wrong, we can change here. So this is general stuff. We can change the name if we want to look at analysis methods. So sometimes we'll forget to change this. So for example, if I apply mean difference now, you'll see that my graphs don't really make sense because they're not fitting on the scale. So we might want to make sure that we've got that correct. So analysis method, standard mean difference, we'll apply that. Analysis details, we might decide we want to look at subtotals, so a pooled effect, or we might want to look at totals and subtotals, so let's add that in. Our graph, we might need to change our scale as well. We might want to change the labels at the bottom, so we won't worry about any of that, so that's fine. So click OK. Now that we've applied the pooling, we can see that we've got an overall pooled effect size of minus 0.51, which indicates that there's a delay in onset time in individuals with patellofemoral pain. You'll see our stare ascent data where we've got lots of different outcomes, but overall the pooled effect size shows that individuals with patellofemoral pain have a delay in glute-med muscle activity. Now, we talked very briefly about the heterogeneity of studies. So this p-value for the heterogeneity is 0.005 and the I-squared of 76%. So it's quite a large amount of heterogeneity. If we have a look, we can see that quite obvious that there's a lot of variation across these. So in simple terms, that's how you go about entering data for effect size calculations or standard mean differences for continuous data. What we'll do now is we're going to add just another variable for dichotomous data, just as an example. So data and analysis, what we're going to do is we'll add another comparison. So this time we're going to look at something slightly different, and we're actually going to look at injury prevention or neuromuscular warm-up programs and their effects on injury prevention. So we'll call this outcome injury prevention, and we'll hit finish. So we've got a second outcome now, which I didn't spell too well. We'll add an outcome which is now dichotomous. So we're going to go next. The name of this outcome is going to be warm-up programs. And we've got groups, we've got a control group, and we've got a warm-up group. So click next. Again, we're going to go with fixed effects. Here we're going to change from odds ratio, we're actually going to use risk ratio. Much easier to understand, as we've talked about previously. We're going to go away and say no totals to begin with, and we're going to click next. On our left side of our graph, we're going to say that decrease injury risk with the warm-up program. And obviously you can play around with your graph labels. You are limited to the number of characters, so you do have to be quite clever about the way you word them sometimes. And then we can say increases risk with the warm-up program. And again, we're going to change our scaling. We're going to make this 10. again, you might need to play around with your scale depending how big your effect sizes or your risk ratios are. And then next, and then we're finished. So now we have some injury prevention. Now we need to add our subgroups and our study data. So we've got warm-up. We're going to add a subgroup because this subgroup is looking at overall injuries. And we've got that in. So now we've got that there, and we're going to add another subgroup, and we've also got overuse injuries. So a little bit more specific, but this could be ankle, it could be knee, it could be anything. So finished. So now what we're going to do is we have to go back because we obviously don't have the references associated with this. And in this example, I'm not going to use the names of the studies in terms of the authors. We're actually going to now use what we want to be titled. So we'll add a study and we're going to call the first one the KIP program, as it was stated. We can add the author to that if we want to. For the purpose of this, I'm just going to call it KIP, and that's finished. We're going to add some more, so we'll add another study. We're also going to look at the 11 plus. So that's finished. We're also going to have a look at the 11 program. Finish. And we're also going to look at the PTP program. And finish. So now we've got those in. We'll come down the bottom here. I'm just going to rename my outcome or my comparison. So as you can see, it's pretty easy to rename things. Enter. That looks a little bit better. So we've got our warm-up programs. We're going to add some study data now to overall injuries. So in overall injuries, we've got the KIP program, we've got the PTP, the 11 and the 11 plus. And we're going to add all of those into the mix. And in the overuse injuries, we've got data for the KIP and the 11 plus. So 11 plus and KIP, and they're in. So now we need the number of events. So this is the number of injuries in the warm-up group, and then the total number of participants, and we need the same for the controls. So in the warm-up program for the KIP, we have a total of 32 injuries. We have a total number of 737 participants. In the control group, we have 65 injuries and we have 755 participants. For the PTP group, we have 121 injuries. So this is for this one. So that was a KIP. For the PTP group, we have 108 injuries. We have a total of 507 participants, so quite a high rate. We have 91 in the control and 513. And then if we have a look at the 11, we have got 181 injuries in the warm-up group out of 1,091 participants. And then in the control group, we have 173 injuries and we have 1,001 participants. And finally, for the 11 plus group, we have got 121, 1,055, 143 and 837. So you'll see a variation in risk ratios. For overuse, we'll put these in also. We have in the KIP, we have 12, we have 737, so same data from before, and then we have 28 and 755. For the 11 plus, we have 27 injuries in the warm-up group out of our 1,055. We have 48 in the control group out of our 837. So hence we now have the data and some nice pretty graphs. If we have a look at those graphs, we can see that there's variation in reduction of injury risk across the programs. As you can see, these aren't ordered, these are ordered in terms of alphabetical. So what I'll do is actually change them and make them in order of effect sizes. The other thing would be interesting to do is just have a look at some data pooling as well, so we'll do that also. So if we go back to here, we can, obviously we're not going to change dichotomous. Analysis method is fine, analysis details is fine. But what we want to do is we want to now look at totals and subtotals, so this will give us our data pooling. We also want to have a look at the graph, and let's do it by effect size, which in this case is risk ratios. We apply that, and then we'll click OK. And then now we have a nice pretty graph which shows us that there's quite a lot of variation for overall injuries between the 4 programs, but overall neuromuscular warm-up programs seem to reduce injury risk. And if we have a look at overuse injuries, similar again. Now they just put these numbers in context. As we talked about, 4.5 means injury risk is half, whereas we've got all the way up to 1.2, which would indicate you're actually more likely to get injuries. Below here we've got 0.44 and 0.45, which is pretty reasonable, so less than half the risk by completing a warm-up program. So in simple terms, that's our I guess process we go through to enter data into Revman. You'll need to play around with it quite a bit, something you'll learn as you go, but hopefully this tutorial will help you get started and help you not to panic too much when you go to use it. Thank you for your time today, and hope you've enjoyed this brief little toot, and good luck getting stuck into your own review.